Kagurabachi already has some of the best villains in modern shonen. They're stylish, threatening, and somehow always manage to steal the spotlight whenever they're on the page. But the villain that's always stuck with me the most is the very first one, Genichi Sojo. And after rereading the Versus Sojo arc, I think he's the perfect villain for Chihiro. Spoilers for the Versus Sojo arc ahead. Everyone has a different idea of what makes the perfect villain. For some people it's how powerful they are or how much fear they bring into the story. But for me, the best villains are the ones that leave a lasting impact on the main character long after they're defeated. Take Pain from Naruto for example. Yeah, he's one of the most threatening villains in the series, but what makes him truly great is how he changes Naruto's perspective. Through Pain, Naruto finally understands the cycle of hatred and the true weight that comes with becoming Hokage. And that's exactly why Genichi Sojo works so well as the first villain in Kagurabachi. He doesn't just challenge Chihiro physically, he fundamentally changes how Chihiro views his father and the legacy of the Enchanted Blades. In the very first panel of Kagurabachi, we see Chihiro Rokuhira forging a blade alongside his father, Kunishige Rokuhira, immediately establishing how close they are. Then, after Shiba's introduced, we learn more about Kunishige's legacy. Shiba glazes him like crazy and says that he's the man whose enchanted blades ended the Seitei War. He even tells Chihiro never to forget that his father is a hero. And what's important is Chihiro's reaction. He says he's already heard that 100 times, but Shiba notices how happy it still makes him. He even tells Chihiro that one day he might become just like his father, which becomes really important later on. But despite all the praise surrounding Kunishige, he makes it pretty clear early on that he never romanticized the swords he created. He openly tells Chihiro that katanas are tools made to kill people and that swordsmiths are complicit in the deaths those weapons cause. That's why he constantly emphasizes the importance of principles. To Kunishige, the blade should only ever be wielded by people dedicated to protecting the weak and destroying evil. And more importantly, they should never fall into the wrong hands. He also insists that it's possible that the enchanted blades aren't the right answer and that Chihiro has to see the world in his own eyes and think about what kind of katana it needs. Then there's a bit of a time skip and we see Chihiro slaying down some people and saying that he can't allow slime to wield katana. And honestly, I really like this aspect of Chihiro's character. Unlike a lot of traditional shonen protagonists, Chihiro doesn't treat killing as some absolute last resort. As long as the people he's fighting are genuinely evil, he's willing to kill them without hesitation. But what's important is why he thinks this way. After Kunishige's death, Chihiro's view of his father becomes even more idealized. Kunishige almost becomes a martyr figure in his mind, and Chihiro grows obsessed with making sure the enchanted blades never fall into the hands of people unworthy of wielding them. And that's where Char Kyoanage becomes really important to the story. Char does a great job revealing the differences between Chihiro and Sojo before the two even clash. Even though Chihiro presents himself as this cold and violent person, he's still deeply compassionate, especially towards someone like Char, who's alone and vulnerable. Despite initially believing her information about the enchanted blades is probably fake, he still takes her out to eat and looks after her. Even Shiba points out how naturally caring Chihiro is towards other people. And once Chihiro realizes Char actually does have information connected to Cloud Gouger, he immediately decides to protect her. On this point, Genichi Sojo is finally introduced, or at least partially, and I love the way that Hokozano handles this scene. Instead of immediately focusing on Sojo himself, the panel centers on the man hanging by his wrist in front of him. Right away, we know what kind of person Sojo is. He has absolutely no tolerance for failure, and he treats people as disposable the moment they stop being useful to him. We eventually see this most clearly with Daruma. Even after Daruma attempts to leave behind his life as a sorcerer and reconcile with what remains of his family, Sojo manipulates him into unknowingly killing both himself and his sister. It's a pretty cruel moment, but it also reveals something really important about Sojo's character. He makes a comment about devoting yourself completely to a single purpose. And unlike a lot of villains who just say things like this, Sojo genuinely lives by that philosophy. Everything in his life revolves around weapons, violence, and his obsession with Kunoshige and his creations. He isn't just a weapons dealer, he almost views the enchanted blades as sacred objects, and his obsession with recreating weapons on the same level as Kunoshige shows just how much deeply that ideology consumes him. We even get small glimpses into Sojo's past through the sorcery that forces people to relive trauma. There's this incredible panel showing Sojo as a child, and he seems to be surrounded by a bunch of dead people. We still don't fully understand what happened to him, but it's clear that violence shaped his worldview from a very young age. And all this eventually leads into the first real clash with Chihiro. What's important about this encounter isn't just the fight itself, it's the difference in how they view the blades. Chihiro immediately asks Sojo whether his blade is stained with the blood of evildoers, directly echoing the ideas of his dad. But Sojo's response is simple, he just doesn't care. And in that moment, Chihiro realizes that Sojo is the exact kind of person his father feared the enchanted blades would fall into. Later in the arc, we're shown what's essentially a public exhibition celebrating the legacy of Kunishige and the enchanted blades. There's even a child standing there in awe of them. But at the same time, Azami points out something important. If two enchanted blade wielders were to fight publicly, innocent people would die and entire buildings could be destroyed. In other words, the heroic image surrounding Kunishige's legacy would collapse instantly. And that idea ties directly into Sojo's worldview. During his confrontation with Chihiro, Sojo openly talks about how much he admires Kunishige. He's obsessed with him. He studied everything he possibly could about the man, and wielding Cloud Gouger is basically a dream come true for him. But what makes this scene so interesting is that Sojo genuinely believes Chihiro completely misunderstands his own father. When Sojo asks Chihiro why he wields the blade, Chihiro repeats Kunishigi's ideals almost word for word to defeat evil and protect the weak. And Sojo is disappointed by that answer. To him, all the stories about Kunishigi being some heroic figure completely miss the point and are a disservice to his legacy. Sojo believes that weapons only exist for one reason, to kill people. That's why one of the most important moments in the arc happens right after this. Sojo launches Mei directly toward the public, and Chihiro absorbs the attack in order to protect innocent people and reserve his father's ideals. He literally burdens himself with the weight of his father's legacy. Meanwhile, Sojo dismisses Chihiro's altruism entirely, calling the enchanted blades weapons of mass destruction. And this is the moment where Chihiro truly loses his composure. Because for the first time, someone isn't just attacking him physically, they're attacking the entire understanding of who his father was. Later, we also learn that Sojo's obsession goes even deeper than simple admiration. He doesn't just want to wield Kunishigi's blades, he wants to be his equal. Learning how unstable and dangerous Daranseki is, Sojo continues trying to recreate weapons on the same level as the enchanted blades. Not only because he idealizes Kunishigi, but because he wants to stand beside him as someone worthy of creating the same destruction. While Chihiro is trying to rescue Char, we just learn how far Sojo is willing to go in pursuit of Kunishigi's level of craftsmanship. Here kind of ties back to what I said before. Char is being brutally experimented on by Sojo because of her regenerative abilities, and he believes that those are the missing pieces he needs to recreate weapons equal to the enchanted blades. And during all of this, Chihiro remembers one of the most important things his father ever told him. Kunishigi never wanted Chihiro to become a copy of him. He tells Chihiro that it would be a waste for him to be born as Chihiro Rokihira if he insisted on trying to be him. Instead, he wanted Chihiro to experience the world for himself and come to his own conclusions about what katanas truly mean. And that realization is what allows Chihiro to evolve Enten and reach its true realm. But what's really interesting is that the same thing happens to Sojo. Cloud Gouger evolves alongside him as well. In a weird way, the enchanted blades themselves almost validate both Chihiro and Sojo's perspectives. The swords created by Kunishigi are evolving differently depending on the convictions of their wielders. And that idea becomes the centerpiece of their final fight. The choreography during the 12-second clash is already incredible, but what makes the scene truly memorable is the conversation happening in the middle of it. Sojo openly acknowledges Chihiro's beliefs, but doesn't believe that they counteract or refute his beliefs. To him, the enchanted blades are still weapons of mass destruction. Meanwhile, Chihiro argues from personal experience. He lived beside Kunishigi every day. He saw the way his father approached forging blades and understood the principles behind them. There's even this funny moment where Sojo almost starts fanboying over the idea of hearing about Kunishigi's personal life before immediately stopping himself. Because deep down, he already has come to his own conclusion of the truth. He's already decided what Kunishigi represents to him. And that's one of the most important parts of Sojo's character. He tells Chihiro that he's wrong for believing that he's the only one that can speak for Kunishigi's legacy. According to Sojo, anyone can claim that role, and their battle is what will decide whose interpretation survives. And for the first time, Chihiro partially accepts that. He remembers his father acknowledging the destruction the blades caused, and realizes that he and Sojo are interpreting different sides of the same man. But even then, Chihiro refuses to respect Sojo, because unlike Sojo, Chihiro still believes the blade should exist to protect people rather than indulge violence. And of course, he ultimately defeats Sojo. Sojo makes a remark that the enchanted blades must have chosen Chihiro, but Chihiro admits the blades also chose Sojo. But even in defeat, Sojo still clings to his obsession. He desperately reaches for the Daranseki, convinced that if he can just control its power, he'll finally stand on the same level as Kunishigi. Instead, the power seemingly tears him apart, and Chihiro's response is pretty important. He tells Sojo that he will never stand equal to his father, and for that reason alone, he'll cut him down. Then with his final breath, Sojo shouts Rokihiro, and I think that moment could be interpreted in two different ways. It's both a final cry towards the hero he idolized but can never reach, and also an acknowledgement of Chihiro, the person who ultimately inherited Kunishigi's legacy, and is also the guy that slayed him. By the end of the arc, Chihiro's image of his father has been permanently changed. He still views his father as a hero and wants to carry on his legacy, but now he understands that there were different sides to his father, and consequences behind his creations that he never really fully grasped. And that's what makes Genichi Sojo such a great first villain. Sojo didn't completely misunderstand Kunishigi. Instead, he saw another side of him, one that Chihiro refused to acknowledge until he was finally forced to confront it himself. And in doing so, Sojo permanently changed Chihiro's perspective, which, like I said in the beginning of the video, is one of the clear signs of a truly great villain. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know if I messed up at the pronunciation of any of the names. If you want to see more breakdowns like this, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.